Good morning, or good morning.
Good morning.
Cotton Churchland.
It was going to happen. You might as well get
yes,
it out of the way at the
yes.
beginning.
Well, let's pray. No, good morning, everybody. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Lacey United Methodist Church. If you haven't been here, we're going to give people a little time because one of his churches, maybe both, are live streaming the event in their space. So we want to give them a little time to set up and be ready. But welcome to Lacey United Methodist Church. If you haven't been here before, the bathrooms are over here. You can get through that door and then turn to your left. We are glad that you're here for what we're calling Surviving the Election. Our hope is that we'll teach you some techniques that might help you have conversations with folks, especially around difficult or complex issues. And then we're going to model that by talking about gun control. We haven't talked about gun control at all.
No.
So hopefully it's something that we disagree on a little bit at least. But if it isn't,
because if we don't, it's going to be a really short conversation.
Yes. If it isn't, we'll transition to another issue. But we want to help you kind of model this for you. And then after each section of this tonight, so after Don speaks his kind of helpful hints, we'll give a time for you to ask questions. After I speak with some of my helpful hints, you'll get a time to ask questions. And then after we have modeling a discussion, you can ask questions. So there'll be plenty of time for you to ask questions. So don't worry about asking your question. There'll be time to do that. So just a little history about the two of us, Reverend Don Stevens and myself, Jonathan Campbell. We are both Methodist pastors in the Greater New Jersey Annual Conference. Right. We met probably longer than that, but we got to know each other well about 5 years ago.
Yeah, 2019.
In a training session for clergy. And we got to know each other. We got to spend a lot of time together. And one of the things we learned was that we both like movies. And a couple years ago, Don...
Probably too much.
Yeah, it's probably too much. A couple years ago, Don set up what is in the conference known as a PACE group. That's a group of clergy that get together to basically support one another and to develop skills with one another and to just kind of be in each other's presence, because if you don't know, being a clergy can be very lonely because you can't obviously talk to your other parishioners about what parishioners are telling you. And so Don had the wonderful idea about creating a clergy group around watching movies every month together. And so we would go to a movie theater, watch a movie together, and then meet for lunch afterwards and talk about the movie, talk about the theological import, talk about how we might use it in our congregations and in our sermons. And Don called me and he goes, "I'm thinking about starting a PACE group about movies." And I said, "That sounds great whenever you want to do it. Let me know." And
in fact, in the year that we were together, there were only two of us that made every single one.
Yeah,
and it
that would be the two of us.
It was us.
So the very last one we had was probably
March of 2020.
Yeah, March of 2020.
Do we have to explain what that means?
Yeah.
Good, okay.
Right before COVID. And everybody else had cleared out of the... we were meeting at Panera, right?
Panera Bread, yeah.
Everybody cleared out of the Panera Bread other than us, and we continued to talk. And at that time, not only was it about COVID was about to hit, we didn't know that at the time, of course, but it was also about the time for the special general conference to talk about human sexuality. And we both know we were on different sides of that issue, and we both were concerned and expressed that concern to one another that we were hopeful that the church would work a way out so that we could stay as colleagues and stay together in the same denomination, because we really enjoyed our friendship and we didn't want to lose it.
Right.
And so that's kind of how we come at that tonight. We want to help folks be better at talking with each other, even if we don't agree with one another, because that is essential for a healthy country, healthy state, healthy town, healthy church. And so that's kind of where the place we're coming out of tonight. And I want to introduce Don Stevens to introduce himself.
Thanks, John. My name is Don Stevens. I serve the Asbury United Methodist Church in Woodstown. Thank you, Dennis and Jim, for making the drive over here. And St. John's United Methodist Church in Harrisonville in Gloucester County. Asbury is in Salem County. And I have been a United Methodist pastor now for, 22 years. And I've described kind of my relationship with Jonathan in that about the only things we have in common is that we're adult white males, we have teenage sons,
yep.
And we like movies.
Yeah. And we're Methodist pastors.
And we're Methodist pastors. So yeah, well, that was the given. But we found that we really enjoyed each other's company, and that we could talk about things that we disagreed on. And we really felt like this was an important skill. It's an important skill for all of us to have, particularly right now, in a time when this country, this society is so very polarized and so very divided that we don't even talk to each other. Jonathan made a really good point today. We were talking, planning about this, and we really haven't done a lot of planning.
No, we probably shouldn't tell you that.
A lot of this is going to be off the cuff, folks. Just understand, the only thing that's scripted is the stuff I want to say about the points that I'm going to make.
Yeah,
Everything else is
I don't use a manuscript. So,
but Jonathan made a really important point that politics in our country right now, the way that our political system is designed is for people to actually be able to talk to one another. And yet we don't do it. And so we're hoping that we can help all of us to kind of regain that skill a little bit. Yeah. Because it's important. It really is important. One thing I do want to say, because we talk a little bit about what we are going to do. Here's what we're not going to do. We're not going to tell you how to vote. Federally, state, or local. We're not telling you that. In fact, we're not telling you who we're going to vote for. Yeah. Because the reality is we're probably voting for different people.
Probably.
Probably. But
we haven't talked about it.
We literally have not talked about it. The one thing we have said, and I'm going to use that quote I just talked about earlier. The one thing we have said is that there are no perfect candidates in this election. And I heard a really interesting point made today from a pastor, and I don't remember exactly where he quoted it from, but I think this...
Wright.
Was it?
N.T. Wright.
N.T. Wright. It was an N.T. Wright quote. Okay, thank you. That the left wants the kingdom without the king, and the right wants the king without the kingdom. And as Christians, and I'm going to add to that now, as Christians, we're called to do both, to have the king and the kingdom. So that's, I think, where we want to go here with these conversations, is how do we have these conversations and still keep the king and the kingdom. Yeah. So.
You want to start with
anything more we want to set up with?
No, I think we're good to start with your helpful hints.
Okay, so I as I said, I preach from a manuscript, so I have to write myself notes. Jonathan, you and some of our colleagues kill me with how well they preach without notes. I can't do it yet. I'm working on it, but. Here's for me, we're each going to share 5 what we want to call helpful hints. Just thoughts, ideas we might like you to keep in your mind when you have these situations. You're going to have conversations with people with whom you do not agree. How do you maintain the relationship? That's where we want to focus tonight. So for me, it starts with mindset. The foundational principle to me is all about how you approach the conversation. I believe that you need to enter the conversation by being focused on the person or on the people across from you. The idea, the topic, the concept is secondary to the relationship or maybe a potential relationship. Now, I understand, I know exactly where you're at here in that this is not going to be an easy thing, particularly when the topic comes up organically, right? You're just around I think Thanksgiving was the idea, right?
Yeah,
You're around the Thanksgiving dinner table and the topic comes up. What Jonathan and I are doing here tonight is to some extent staged. We know the topic that we're going to discuss later to model these ideas. Yeah. We haven't planned or researched for it. I mean, I know I haven't. Jonathan says he hasn't. So, I mean, we're not, it's not like we're planning for a debate, because that's not really what we're doing. But our discussion isn't scripted. It's not written down like my points are. Nonetheless, the goal in mindset is to have in mind that when a particular polarizing topic comes up, that you're trying to make or strengthen a connection rather than make a point or win an argument. By the way, nobody's keeping conversation scores. There's not a scoreboard. It's not a debate stage. We are deliberately avoided the pulpits because we didn't want this to look like a debate stage. So the second is something that I call Spock talk. Just by a show of hands, how many of you have watched at least one episode of the original Star Trek series? Right? All of us pretty much know that one. Yeah. So you know who Spock is. And Spock was known for logic and lack of emotion, right? Emotion was bad. This is something, and I'm not, don't get me wrong here, I'm not going off on emotions are bad. But it's something that we should try to emulate a little bit when we engage in divisive topics. Because we need to make every effort to consciously separate our emotions from the conversation. Again, I know that's not easy. I am probably as emotional as anybody when it comes to a topic I'm passionate about. When I get on my hobby horse. And it's harder to do if the topic arises without some notice. But when the topic does come up, I try to practice something, like I said, it's called Spock talk. Separating our emotions from the moment, okay? Yes, I'm very passionate about this. But if I react or I respond emotionally, particularly if I'm disagreeing with the person across from me, then it is almost definitely going to go off the rails and into the ditch. And once the discussion is off the rails and in the ditch, it's almost certainly going to become an argument. And an argument is only going to lead to harsh or negative responses. I know Jonathan and I have both heard from folks who said, well, what if your discussion becomes an argument? Kind of defeats the whole purpose, doesn't it? Why did we bother?
Yes.
So to avoid that argument, I try to separate my emotional response from the discussion. Third thought here is make it a value proposition. Now, kind of branching out from this idea of Spock talk, the idea of removing emotion from the discussion, approach the conversation as something of a value, an equation, right? Now, in the marketing world, a value proposition is a statement of the benefits that a company delivers to its customers. It explains why a customer should choose your product or your service and what makes that product or service unique. In the world of healthy conversations, it's consciously weighing the risks and the benefits of the interaction. So ask yourself if the relationship with this person with whom you're speaking is more or less valuable than being right or winning a point. And again, nobody's keeping score. There's no trophy at the end for winning the argument. If being right, though, and I might challenge you a little bit here, if being right is more important than the person across from you, I might ask why you're even bothering to engage. You see, as Christians, we're called to value all people. All people have intrinsic value. All people are loved by God. So we're already called to engage. So if you're going to follow the commands of Jesus Christ, then we're called to place the person above the idea. I can't even begin to catalog for you the stories that I have heard of people who are distant from old friends and even family members because an idea became more important than the relationship. And that's just sad. We need to value people first. That's a value proposition. The next one is something that my grandmother used to say to me. My grandmother's been gone since I was 8 years old, so this one's been around for a while. My grandmother used to say that God gave you one mouth and 2 ears so that you would listen twice as much as you talk. Hello? Yeah, that one's not easy for us, is it?
Nope. Especially for pastors.
Especially as a pastor. We get paid to talk. And we're not good at it. I'll be the first to admit, I'm not always really good at this. It is a common practice for us to think about what we're going to say next instead of listening to what the other person is saying right now. How often have we caught ourselves asking someone to repeat what they just said because we weren't really paying attention? We were thinking about what we were going to say. You know, my wife Bonnie, is a professional mental health therapist. And this is what she would call reflective listening. It shows that you're paying attention and that you're genuinely curious about the other person's perspective. And it's exemplified with phrases like, "So what I hear you saying is," or "Did I hear you correctly when you said," or even "Tell me why that's important to you, because I disagree, but I want to know why it's important." See, the goal here again is to understand the other person and understand their perspective and not to win them over or win the argument. Finally, the last point I want to touch on is about being right and wrong. I mentioned my wife, Bonnie. We've been married for it'd be 34 years this year. And one of those things you learn about when you are married for 34 years is priorities, particularly when it comes to your relationship, or really any relationship. If you ask Bonnie, she can tell you that there are times when I really, really, really want to be right. And I'm not. But it happens. But being right, winning the argument, and why are you having an argument to begin with? But that's a separate topic. Being right or winning the argument isn't the goal in having a better conversation. Ultimately, what we are attempting, what I hope we're attempting, is understanding. and finding peaceful situations, places where we can coexist. So I try to keep those thoughts in mind. I don't have to be right. In fact, being right means that someone else was wrong. I don't have to win. Because if I'm winning, then someone else is losing. And someone else is going to feel hurt or marginalized or disenfranchised, and I don't want that. What I do have to do is I have to understand. I have to find a place where we can stand on common ground together, a place to foster peace and coexistence. That's my 5.
Did you guys have any questions about Don that you wanted to ask Don before I share my ideas? Okay. Thanks.
Sure, go ahead.
Piece that I heard in what you said, when I get involved in conversations, it sometimes seems to be the difference between talking with and talking at.
Yes.
That, to me, sometimes gets to be the biggest impediment.
Could you restate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, what I'm hearing, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to repeat what you're saying so that folks who are watching a live stream hear what you're saying. You're pointing up the idea of the difference between talking with someone and talking at someone, and I would even expand further on that in that times, particularly, and Jonathan and I have talked about this, particularly in the division that's arisen in the last number of years in the UMC. We don't talk with each other. We don't even talk at each other. We talk past each other. I'm trying to make my point, and you're trying to make your point, and none of us are hearing each other. And there's no common ground when you're talking past each other, and thank you for bringing that up. That really is.
That gets to be the sense that I have when I am with or observing conversations between people who may be disagreeing. If they can talk with, then there's a sharing of listening as well as trying to make whatever their point is. When it's a conversation, it's not at.
Right. Right, and I'm 100% right there with you. We need to find those places where we're talking with each other, where we're having a conversation. We're not just trying to make our point, because I might make my point. I can make my point. Jonathan and I can have this conversation we're going to have later. I can make my point, and I can have people on the live stream that are 100% agreeing with me, but it doesn't foster any kind of solid relationship. I'm not giving ground for us to see eye to eye. And that's really where, for me, that's a very key principle, and I appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you. Good. All right, let me try to sum that into a question that the folks on the stream can hear. What you're asking is, how do we find common ground with people who are so staunchly against anything that we believe, right? Am I close to what you're saying there? Okay. Well, the first thing I'm going to say, and part of what you brought up was about social media. How do I put this nicely?
Don't have conversations on
Social media is a garbage fire. Most of it is. And it's not the hardest part of that is it's not real life, but so many people believe it is. Social media is not real life. So part of what we're saying is having these conversations face to face. Still, you will have those situations where you come up against someone who you just can't agree with, and sometimes you just have to agree to disagree. And sometimes you just have to say, well, I'm sorry that you feel that way. I don't agree with you, you know. And we very well could do that tonight. We don't know how that's going to go. But that might be your end game there sometimes, you know. The question is, how much do you value the relationship? And do you want to maintain the relationship? That's what hopefully we're trying to build skills for that. So, thank you.
Ed has a question.
Yeah. Again, let me repeat. Are there tools that I have found useful, particularly when it comes to mindset, when we're having... Now, I will tell you, personally, I use these myself, right? So I'm trying to focus on these things myself. I'm going to be the first one to admit, I'm not always good at it, right? Sometimes my emotions will get the best of me, and I am personally distant from people, friends, not family, but friends because of political issues, right? It has to be something that we foster over time. You really have to kind of be able to take, the first thing I try to do is take that step back. Not physically, obviously, but because that conveys something else, and Jonathan will get to that, but to kind of mentally take that step back and say, okay, I need to, what do I want out of this? What is the end game here? You know, do I want a discussion, or do I want an argument? You know, so you almost have to be able to take that, at least that 1 second pause, right? Take a deep breath. It's a good skill. Take a deep breath. Okay. Where am I going next? Does that help?
Yeah, I was thinking of things like maybe humor.
Humor is disarming. It can work. It can also send the whole thing off the rails.
If you use humor, use it on yourself.
Yes, self-deprecating humor is good. Yeah. Go ahead.
This isn't a question, okay?
Mm-hmm.
It's a statement. I'm just grateful to be here tonight because I feel God was calling me home the other night. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully my husband was with me and he talked me through it. And I guess God's got some reason for me to still be here. I don't know why, but it's just something that happened.
We're very glad you are here.
Yeah.
To be in this church tonight.
We're glad you're here.
We're very glad you are here. And I have a colleague of ours. Do you know Scott? Scott? Okay. Colleague of ours, when he was in the church nearby to where I was serving previously. I went there one time and they had this whole campaign in his church that was, if you're not dead, you're not done. All right?
Not dead yet.
And so it's really good advice, folks.
Yeah.
You're not done yet.
I got an issue, and I don't know how to deal with it.
All right, John's going to deal with that then. Go. See, self-deprecating. There you
Yes.
Go ahead.
Conversation with somebody on a sensitive subject,
Mm-hmm.
and then you inadvertently step on a hot button issue that sends the other person into orbit,
Mm-hmm.
and explosions, and the conversation ends. And I don't know how to deal with that. I apologize, but I don't know what I'm apologizing for. And I don't know what to do with that.
Can I give you a one word? And again, for the live stream, you had a conversation with somebody, you stepped on a hot button issue, the conversation blew up, and now you can't seem to mend it. Am I in there somewhere?
I'm trying to find out what did I do.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I'm going to give you a one word answer, and it cures an awful lot of things. Food. No, I'm not kidding. If you sit down over a meal, it is really difficult
Jesus did all the
to
time.
be at odds with someone if you can sit down over a meal together. If you can invite them to meet you at the diner and for breakfast or lunch or something like that, and just have a conversation. Hey, I don't know what I did. I really want to fix this. So help me understand. I think that and be take that mea culpa, right? Say, I understand I did something. I don't know what it was. Please help me understand because I want to fix this. But start with food. Seriously. Because it absolutely works.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah.
I will only advocate for non-alcoholic drink when it comes to that.
Yeah.
Dennis, you got a question, my friend? Mm-hmm.
Well, people tend to put in writing on social media. I agree wholeheartedly about social media. I myself divorced myself from social media for those same reasons, for some of those reasons. At any rate, what I was trying to say is people have a tendency to be more aggressive when they're putting it on social media because it's impersonal.
There's a level of anonymity with social media. Yeah. One would hope. It doesn't always work out that way, that people are less forceful in their opinions face-to-face. Some folks are more so. But yes, social media is not the real world, and that's the reality of it. It just, there's that level of anonymity, there's that level of all of us have a little bit of a keyboard warrior in us, It's true. It's true. So thank you, Dennis. Appreciate it. Am I going to let Jonathan talk at all tonight? I think you're on, man.
Okay. You can go to the next slide, Steve. Thanks. Okay, so here are my 5 helpful hints. One is body language. The vast majority of how we communicate is not what we say. So you always have to think about your body when you're talking to somebody. So here's some helpful hints. Make eye contact. Smile. I know that's crazy, but smile. If you can, don't stand up and have the conversation. But if you are standing up and there's no way for you to sit down, then make sure your body is positioned toward them. Okay? Also, don't cross your arms, because this is a natural way of people feeling like you are being defensive. Okay? So, for example, if someone's standing in front of you, and let's say they start the conversation, you're over here, and you start talking to them like this, As the conversation goes on, move so you're standing face to face with them, your feet are toward them, you're engaged. If you're standing or sitting, try to lean forward as they talk. Don't lean back, because leaning back tends to imply that you are upset with them. This is all stuff that's internal to us as human beings. It's not stuff that any of us are processing, but it's stuff that we will pick up on instinctively. So it's things that you need to think about. If you're sitting down, face the person in the conversation. Lean toward them as they're talking or as you're talking. Try not to lean back. Try not to don't like stare at them forcefully, but don't also break eye contact all the time, so when they're talking you're looking over here or you're looking over here. Or if like you're in a very busy space and that's not an option, like you're in a coffee shop and a group of high schoolers just came in and it's starting to get noisy, recognize that in the conversation and maybe go, hey, I'd like to try to get together later and talk, or do you mind if we switch subjects for a while until it kind of calms down? Because atmosphere has a huge impact on conversation. It just does. And so all of those things you have to think about. So number 2, admit to the struggle. So when you're having a difficult conversation with somebody, if they mention something you struggle with that conversation, even if you're on the other side of it, let's say you were talking about abortion, and you talk about, okay, I tend to describe myself as pro-choice, but I do struggle with late-term abortions, let's say. Recognize that in the conversation and say, okay, I'm pro-choice, but I do struggle with this issue. I do struggle with this. What are your thoughts about it? So recognize the struggle that you might have with the issue. Don't act like you have all the answers, because none of us do. Also, if you don't understand something about an issue, or they ask a question that you don't have the answer to, just say, I don't have the answer to that, or that's a really good point. I would like to do some research on that, or can you tell me more about that? Do not lie. Do not act like you know what they're talking about if you don't, and admit to the reality that you have something to learn. It will ease the conversation, make them feel better, and will drop their defenses because you're being authentic and real, that you don't have a piece of information or that you struggle with this aspect of the issue. Okay, ask open-ended questions. You're not on trial. They're not on trial. Ask them. Do not ask them a yes or no question. Just don't. Ask them questions that they have to answer with sentences. It allows you to get to know them more. It also will help drop any kind of tension, because we all like to talk about ourselves. I'm just being honest. All of us like to talk about each other. Even if you're an introvert or an extrovert, we get something out of feeling like somebody actually wants to know more about us. So live into that when you're having a conversation with somebody. And one way that you can do that is by asking them a question that they have to spend a couple minutes answering. Okay? Common ground. When you see common ground in a conversation, claim it. Say, hey, you know what? I agree with you about that. That's a really good point. And then try to build the rest of the conversation on that common ground that you just found. Say, okay, we don't agree about this aspect of this issue, but let's go back to the thing we agree about. And how could we work on that? Or how could we develop a better understanding of each other's positions about the thing we both view as important or valuable to continue to talk about? And then finally, don't get lost in the weeds. Someone mentions a point and you're like, that didn't happen in 64, that happened in 65. And your instinct is to grab your phone and go, I'm going to prove it to you. You're lost in the weeds.
Oh, you're wrong on that.
Put your phone down If you both agree the event happened, guess what? It doesn't matter if it happened in 64 or 65. Keep the conversation going. The other thing that you will find all the time is that we will be using words and we are not using the same definition for the word.
Yes.
So take time to get out of the weeds and say, I know this kind of sounds silly, but could you define what you mean when you use this term? So for example, if you're talking and all the time you or the other person is using the term justice, then go, hey, do you mind if we stop for a second? Could you tell me what you mean when you say justice? What do you mean by the word justice? What does that mean for you? What you will find sometimes is you are using two different meanings for the same word. And so you're again talking past each other. I would probably end with just trying to help you recognize that our federal system of government and most of our state systems of government, because most states' constitutions are built upon the concepts in the U.S. Constitution. Our very systems of government have been set up to require, for really big things to happen, for there to be compromise. Whether you like it or not, the Founding Fathers created systems that require people that see things differently, if they want to get things done, to actually talk with one another and compromise with each other to move it forward. I gave the example to Don. I was born in Kansas and spent my first 15 years there. And for that entire time, Bob Dole was the senator from my state. Bob Dole was, for many, many years, the Senate minority and then majority leader of the Senate, the U.S. Senate. He ran for president in 96. What most people don't know now, we've lost it. I'm a political science major, so these things fascinate me. He and Tip O'Neill was the Democratic, Bob Dole was a Republican. Tip O'Neill was the Democratic Speaker of the House and majority leader for most of that time. What most people don't know is both of them chose to have a weekly card game and dinner for their members. So they intentionally asked Republicans and Democrats on a regular basis to every week to come together and play cards and eat dinner with one another. Now imagine today what would happen if someone on TV shared, did you know that Senator Schumer and Representative Johnson, Speaker Johnson, weekly have people from their party get together and eat together and play games together? Oh my God, social media would lose their mind.
People's heads would explode.
People would go, traitors, literally, I'm not teasing you. Both Speaker Johnson and Majority Leader of the Senate, Schumer, would get death threats. And people would be like, you're being a traitor. But our system of government that we care about, that we love, that allows our country to be stable when it's working, requires that very act, that people that disagree come together and try to find compromise. And yes, I know none of us are members of the House or Senate. None of us probably are in the legislative bodies of New Jersey. But that principle still should apply to us, I think, is if we want things to work well at the county level, the local level, the church level, we have to recognize that ingrained in how we think about politics, and all politics means is life together. That's all that word means. Ingrained in how we've been raised is this idea that compromise is essential, and I think it is. So to compromise, you actually got to talk to one another. And to compromise, you actually have to believe that the other person has value and that they offer value to you. And so if we want a healthy society, I think we have to reclaim that. And it starts with all of us recognizing the need to compromise, to have conversations, to build relationships, to have dinners and play games with one another, for lack of a better way. So, does anybody have any questions for me before we have our discussion around gun control? Yeah, Ed.
I just would like to make sure, I'm trying to summarize what we've talked about so
Yeah.
far. And the nut of it, as I see it, is put aside the issues and focus on the relationship.
Yeah.
Get the relationship going, do what you can to lower the temperature.
Yeah.
And create an environment for back and forth.
Yeah.
Then bring in the issues.
So for the people on the live stream, Ed was saying he's trying to figure out how to summarize this, and he thinks a good way to summarize it is don't focus as much on the issue, focus on the person and building the relationship with the person. Yeah, yeah, to start.
And, and use
absolutely.
great terminology there with
Yeah.
lower the temperature.
Yeah, lower the temperature.
Really
Yeah.
excellent terminology. Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I'm a political science major. I've worked on several campaigns, and one of the things that I've done is knocked on doors and tried to have conversations with people to ultimately encourage them to vote for the person that I was working for, right? Or volunteering for. What we were told and what I saw to be true is that only works. So if you hope that someday Uncle Bob will see your position the way that you see your position, Uncle Bob is unlikely to change his mind if you attack him. If you make him feel defensive, he's going to put his walls up and not talk to you anymore. But if you honestly try to be curious about the person you're having the conversation with, if you just simply start with, I want to know you better, and I want to know what drives you better, and I want to understand why you vote the way you vote, or why you see this issue the way you see this issue, you're much more likely, if you create a hospitable environment for that person, to actually have a good enough conversation that maybe someday they at least see your point of view and don't poo-poo it. So, again, part of this is the most effective way to communicate is to make people feel at home and feel respected and feel valued. And you do that by caring more about them and their story and their issues and why they're important than if you make them feel like your agenda is, from the start, you're wrong, I'm right, see it my way. And so, again.
And honestly,
yeah,
that's the way Jesus functioned.
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
He put the other first.
Yeah. The conversation, again, the joke in New Testament studies, I've said this before, the joke about in New Testament studies is Jesus eats his way through the Gospels.
Right.
There's a reason why Jesus is always inviting himself to dinners or having people over for dinner, because food, conversation, setting with each other, spending time with each other is going to open up hospitality, going to open up the idea that I care about you and I value you and I actually want to listen to you. And that's the most important thing is if you want to have a good conversation with someone, make them feel like you actually want to get to know them, that you actually care about them. Any other comments or questions? Yeah, Rich.
Back to Ed's comment or question from earlier. Arrows in the quiver. It seemed to me that both of you are using the same arrows and quiver
Pretty much.
type thing, because in trying to put yourselves in a relationship with an individual, you are listening to what they are saying,
Yeah.
and then you are saying, this is what I hear you say,
Yeah.
keeping yourself on that same plane,
Yeah.
wandering off the
A valuable tool is, yeah.
That seems to be the principle.
Yeah. Rich was asking about tools that he saw that we were using, that we both were using. One of the things that Don mentioned that I would really emphasize is when you're having a conversation, restate the comment the other person, or even the argument the other person is making. Say, this is what I heard you say, am I correct? And that a term for that in discussion and debate is steel manning their argument. So give them back the best version of the argument that you heard them make. And that makes them take you seriously, because you're not trying to go to some crazy extreme about what they said and make them look silly. You're saying, this is the best of what I heard you say. Am I right? And if you're not right, then readjust it so you go, okay, I missed that. I'm sorry I missed that. And then take this is I language. Take responsibility. If you say, this is what I heard you say, and your interlocutor, the person who's having the discussion with you, if they say, no, that's not what I said, this is what I said, or this is what I meant, go, I'm sorry. I language. I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry that I misunderstood. I apologize. You never put it on them. You put it on you. When you put it on you, it makes people feel at ease because they don't feel defensive. You're not saying, well, you made a stupid argument, or you weren't clear about that. You go, I apologize, I didn't understand. Could you restate that in a different way so maybe we can have a better conversation? So I language is really important.
You're absolutely never going to be able to have a conversation with someone with whom you are dismissive.
Yes.
You know, if you hear their ideas and go, you're an idiot.
Yeah. It's not going to go well.
There's no conversation.
Yeah.
No, and if there's no conversation, there's no relationship.
Yeah. So any other questions before we get down to the fight we're going to have over
The fight.
No, just yeah.
When there's a project to be done, don't you think it's better that there is disagreement to make a project better?
Yeah, I mean, I told, she asked, is it good for, there be healthy disagreements in projects and stuff? Absolutely. I told Don this when we got together, I mentioned this in a sermon probably a year ago or so. There's a Harvard study that showed that if people put you in an MRI and scanned your brain, and at the same time showed you pictures of dangerous things, like jumping out of an airplane, bungee jumping, that kind of thing, the scientists, with just that data, and they obviously mapped your brain while you were seeing these dangerous issues, or dangerous situations, they could, at 75% accuracy, identify how you voted, just by that data point. If they then followed up and asked you how your parents tend to vote, they were able to accurately predict how you voted 85% of the time. Which means being liberal and conservative, at least for me, this is how I read it, being liberal and conservative may be part of who we are. And if it is who we are, then there's no reason why I should get mad at someone is conservative or liberal. What I need to recognize is maybe, just maybe, God gifted us each other because we will build a better society if we actually work with each other, care about each other, and listen to one another. Just a possibility. So yes, what Dottie mentioned is to actually move things forward, you're going to have conflict. But you don't have to have dismissive conflict. You don't have to have disrespectful conflict. And you don't have to have conflict where you don't see the value of each other. And there's the difference.
Yeah, some conflict and disagreement in any situation is normal and healthy.
Yeah.
We're not saying that, it's all rainbows and unicorns.
Yeah.
What we are hoping is that somehow we can garner some skills that help us to move to healthier conversations and healthier conflict.
Lori, I saw a hand.
First a comment. I've always found that opinions are based on life experiences.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So whoever you're talking to has had a different experience than you.
Yeah.
They can have a different opinion and you have to respect that.
Yeah.
But my question is, what if you're talking to someone who is so stubborn, they don't want to talk, you can't have a civil conversation with them?
Change the subject.
Yeah. Okay, so basically Lori's question was how do you have a conversation with someone that's kind of refuses to have a conversation with you, right?
They're right, and
Yeah.
they're gonna listen to anything you have to say.
What, again, no way is perfect to fix these things. And there's some situations where people are not healthy for you, and sometimes you have to recognize that.
Yeah.
But if you get to an impasse with someone, one thing you can try is to say, your relationship with me is really important. You're really important. I really want you and value you in my life. This issue is really putting strain on that. Is there a way that we could have this conversation in a way where we'll listen to each other? You know, and I want to do that so that we will, because you're valuable to me. Kind of telling them that, look, I care about you, and I really want to work through this. May disarm them, and one thing I would say to the Spock thing is good. It's a good comment. Try to take your emotions out of it. It's also very valuable to recognize the issues you can't.
Right.
So we all have issues that we really can't take our emotions out of.
Yeah.
Those are usually the conversations you may have to say to someone, hey, at this point, I can't have this conversation with you. It's not because I don't care about you. I don't want you to be in my life. But this issue for me is so raw or so filled with emotion that I don't think we're going to have a good conversation. Again, put it on yourself. But know those areas, because we all have those issues that are just triggering for us. And if it's triggering for you, then it may be a conversation that you need to step out of. And it's okay to step out of it. I would encourage you to maybe work on dealing with that so you can have the conversation, but also be able enough to be understanding of where you're at to say, maybe this is an issue I can't have the conversation with. And right now it's not something that I can talk about. And that's okay too. Let's get started. What do you say? Okay. So I know,
break out the boxing gloves.
Yeah. No. So when we brought this up, when I brought this possibility up, I said we probably should end with modeling.
Right.
And you almost immediately, I don't remember your term. I don't remember the word you used, but you almost went.
I said we should each pick a personal hobby horse.
Hobby horse. Okay.
Yeah.
So where I want to start, it's been curious to me. One, I realized how old we both were because I'm like, I know what that word is, and you used it. Because my kids will never say hobby horse.
You all know that one, right? Yeah. Okay.
Okay. For the young people that might be watching, hobby horses used to exist. They were wooden things that children sat on that looked like horses, but they moved up and down like a swing set, kind of. They moved up and down. Okay.
Something like that. Yeah.
Something like it. Okay. So, I since you've said it, I've been curious. Why is this a hobby horse for you?
Well, the topic is guns or gun control.
Yeah.
Right. For me, I am a pretty staunch advocate of the Second Amendment.
Okay.
I grew up around. Now I grew up in New Jersey, so the laws in New Jersey are not really favorable to gun owners. But I grew up around guns. My dad always had guns. I learned how to shoot when I was a kid, and I feel personally that the state laws are maybe too overbearing on gun owners.
So I'm going to really quick look at my phone just to see what time it is because I don't want to.
7:20ish.
7:29. Yeah. Okay. So didn't want to break eye contact without letting you know what I was doing. Okay. So
he's already doing research.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So in what ways would you want to see the state laws be different? Like if you could wave a magic wand and have it the way you'd want to have it, what changes would you make?
Well, I would model, I think, New Jersey's gun laws on other states.
Okay.
You know, states maybe like South Carolina
Yeah.
or Tennessee.
Okay, so like, can you give me an example?
Well, okay, so in places like that, you don't need, so maybe it requires a little explanation, right? In New
Sure.
Jersey, in order to purchase any firearm,
Mhm.
you have to fill out an application, pay a fee,
Okay.
get fingerprinted,
Okay.
do background check,
Mhm.
and then you can buy, when you get it, what's called a firearms owner's ID card, FOID.
Okay. So like a driver's license.
It's like a driver's license,
Okay.
right? When you get that, then you can purchase long guns.
Okay.
Any that you want, as long as they're legal within New Jersey.
Okay.
Okay, so shotguns,
Okay.
rifles,
Okay.
etc.
Okay.
For each handgun that you want to own, you have to go through the entire process over again.
Okay.
Now, that's just to own them.
Yeah.
If you want to go to the range and shoot them,
Mhm.
you must separate. The gun has to be unloaded
Yeah. Okay. While you
Um,
travel.
while you travel.
Okay.
It has to be unloaded,
Okay.
locked in a container, in a separate compartment from the ammunition, which is also locked in a container,
Okay.
which makes it difficult if you have an SUV or a pickup truck.
So it has to be in
And
two
you
different.
can go, right,
be
it has to be in two different
containers.
compartments of the car.
Okay.
You have to go directly to the range
And directly back.
and directly home.
Okay.
Now, recently, because of a decision at the Supreme Court, it is much easier. It used to be almost impossible to obtain a carry license
Okay.
in New Jersey.
In New Jersey. Okay.
Next to impossible.
Okay.
Because they could just deny you.
Okay.
They just say,
Sure.
no, we don't.
Yeah.
You're not allowed. Now, they cannot deny you, but you have to again go through the process. You have to take training, and there's no open carry, so it's only concealed.
Okay.
And there's like tons of places that are restricted that you
Okay.
can't carry.
Okay.
So
like, just because we're short on time, right?
I mean, it's a lot. I'm going through a lot of the
No.
laws
I
here.
no. I
Yeah.
really appreciate
Yeah.
that, because I'll be honest. I'm not a gun owner.
Yeah.
I've never owned a gun. I've never tried to own a gun,
Mhm.
so I know nothing about this process. I'll be honest. I don't know anything
Yeah.
about this process. So that was actually really helpful.
It's
I-
very
I
restrictive,
appreciate
and
that.
that's the
So
point. Yeah.
so just for time's sake, like, what are two things you'd want to change?
I think the requirement for an FOID and all of that process.
Okay.
Also the cost.
Okay.
Right now, for instance, it's $50 for your FOID card,
Okay.
and you have to renew that I believe it's every 4 years.
Okay.
Okay. And for concealed, it's $200 every 2 years, and the governor's trying to double both of those
Okay.
to 100 and to 400.
Okay. Is that per gun, or is that just?
That's per person.
Per person, okay.
But for carry,
Yeah.
you're only certified for one.
Okay.
Like if you have multiple handguns, you're only certified that you can carry
for
one.
So you can only carry one.
Right.
Okay. So let me just see if the two changes you'd make is what, drop the fee or drop the
I would.
whole rate?
I mean, the fee used to be $5.
Okay. Sure.
When you raise it to $50,
Yeah.
when you make the carry fee $200,
Yeah.
what you're really doing is you're taking the
Yeah.
ability for low-income people
Yeah.
to be able to defend themselves if they
yeah.
have to, right?
You're using price as a way to keep people from
Right.
doing it. Okay.
Exactly.
No, I think that's a fair loose read on it. Okay. So again, let me restate it.
Mm-hmm.
So your two things would be did you say you would drop the fee
I would
back
drop
to 5, or would you?
I would drop the fee. Well, I'd drop it to 0, honestly,
Okay.
but because I believe it's a constitutional right.
Okay. So would you still want them to do you said the FOB card?
The FOID.
FOID?
See, in most states, you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
So you can
what I'm
because
getting-
because every gun purchase already comes with a federal background check.
Okay.
There's
Yeah.
a lot of noise around. Well, we want universal background check. They already do universal background checks.
Okay.
They're already done.
Okay.
So everyone has to have a NICS check. It's called
Okay.
every purchase.
Okay.
So honestly, if I were a resident of South Carolina, I could walk into a gun shop, I could slap down $600. They do the NICS check. It takes 20, or however much the firearm is, right?
Sure.
And they can do the NICS check in 20 minutes,
Yeah.
and I can leave with what I purchased.
So, is there any? Let me ask you, in your opinion, is there any value? You okay if I just call it a the
FOID.
FOID? What's that stand for? Firearm.
Firearms owner identification card.
Okay, so I'm going to say identification card just for make
The
it
ID,
simple. Okay,
yeah.
the ID. Are you? Let me just ask: are you opposed to an ID? Let's say that it was free, but you still needed the ID. Would you be okay with that?
I am kind of opposed to it strictly
Okay.
because I think that what it does ultimately is it creates a database
Okay.
that the government is not allowed to have,
Okay.
but they have it anyway.
Database for gun owners.
For gun owners,
Okay.
right.
And why do you think that's? Why do you think it's a bad thing?
Ultimately,
Yeah.
because history has a tendency to repeat itself.
Okay.
And when there have been federal firearms databases, tyrannical governments have come and taken away the firearms of the citizens.
Okay.
And they can only take away the ones they know out of. So the law-abiding people who follow the law lose their guns,
Yeah.
and the people who don't follow the law
Yeah.
don't.
Okay. Okay. So the two things you'd change are you get rid of the ID, right? Is that fair?
And the fees. So, I mean,
And the
yeah, so it's kind of the same
So
thing.
those are
Yeah.
the two things, or would there be something else you'd want to?
I think that covers a lot.
Okay.
I mean, that covers a lot of
Okay. So just I want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. You'd want to get rid of the ID, and you'd want to get rid of the fee.
Yeah.
So you basically the ID would be gone.
Yeah.
That idea.
I mean, people who follow the law, they are not the people that are abusing their guns.
Yeah.
That's
Let me ask you, would you be opposed to having some kind of system where before you purchased a weapon, you had to take a safety course on a weapon?
I don't think that's a terrible idea.
Okay.
The real challenge for that, again, I'm going to go back to something I've already said, is price.
Yeah.
When you start to price people out. For
Well,
instance, a concealed carry course is a
Yeah.
minimum of $150,
do
plus
you-
the $200 for the.
Yeah. Do you know? I don't know this. It's been a while since I got my driver's license. Does anybody know what the price is for a driver's license? $24.
Yeah, there you go.
Would you be okay with you had to pay $24 and you had to do a course, a safety course?
Again, my problem here is that, okay, I pay $24 for the privilege of driving a vehicle, but my ownership of a firearm is not a privilege, it's a constitutionally guaranteed right.
Okay.
So I think in 2A says, shall not be infringed.
Sure.
Any fee, it
Yeah.
really is an infringement, right?
Okay. So let me take you like where I'm coming from.
Sure.
And maybe we could talk about this. To me, I'll be honest, I think the price piece is a thing worth talking about and worth worrying about.
Sure.
It does seem excessive that you would have to pay $50. That seems a little high, to be honest. Because I don't really want to make money off of this. I would be more interested in having someone make sure they did a safety course. Like, to me, that's what I'd
Right.
want.
Right.
That to me that makes sense. That everybody that wants to buy a gun, you gotta prove that you know how to use it. Just like my youngest is about to go through a driving class, right? And he has to take the driving class.
Sure.
And to me that makes sense. So to me, I don't want the state to make money off of this, and I think it's kind of unfair to financially penalize people. But at the same time, I'll be honest, I feel like there's value in saying we want you to be trained on a weapon,
And I will not wholly and completely disagree with that. I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair statement in that it is a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
So my dad
Yeah.
knew he had guns in the house,
Yeah.
and he made sure that we knew how to use them. We knew the safety rules.
Okay.
My son,
Yeah.
same thing.
Yeah.
Right? He knows. In fact, we'll sit sometimes when we're watching a movie and I'll go, Dad, bad trigger control.
Yeah.
You know, he points stuff out in the movies that are
Yeah.
so. Yes, I agree. To a point, I agree with you. I think, again, the price is an issue.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, for concealed carry, you have to take a course that's a minimum of $150 plus the $200 for the card, you know, to concealed carry. So now you're $350 in just to be able to carry your firearm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I honestly can see where the fees can feel excessive. So one of the things that I struggle with is I have no problem saying it's in the Constitution. It was viewed as an important right. That I'm personally a person that doesn't feel like we should ban guns. I'm not a person who would say ban all guns, that kind of thing.
And we can agree on that.
Yeah, that's agreement, right? I guess I do struggle with when that was written. It took what 30 seconds to load, around and
yes and no.
Yeah, but I mean it took a long. I mean you could not shoot, 12 shots in 30 seconds or in a minute.
Well, there actually were firearms
there
at
were.
the time. Yes, there were actually Gatling guns. It's called a puckle gun. Look it up.
But
P-U-C-K-L-E.
Gatling guns were later, right? It wasn't when the Constitution was
Puckle gun was prior to the Constitution.
Really?
Yes.
I did not know that. That's something I knew. I appreciate that information.
Yeah.
So, but for the most part.
Also, the founding fathers didn't say you couldn't own a cannon.
Sure.
Sorry, you're wrong, Joe.
Okay. We'll set the cannon thing aside.
I'm sorry, I had to put a little humor in there.
But no, that's fine. But I do feel like, for the most part, guns were not to the accuracy, not to the volume, not to the,
That's fair.
And so, would you recognize that there is some kind of recognition that the guns they were talking about are not the guns that are a lot of times that exist?
Well, I think that we have to look at it as, if we're going to talk about the firearms have progressed and the technology is better for that. Well, the technology is better for speech too. Are we going to limit that?
Yeah.
Are we going to say, well, you're only limited to the quill and the parchment?
Yeah. So let me ask you. I'm curious. So on the First Amendment, there's a famous comment from the Supreme Court when it has ruled on the
fire in a movie
on
theater?
the First Amendment. Yeah, the fire in the movie theater.
Mm-hmm.
That speech right, your right to speak, ends at causing immediate harm to others. Right. That's basically what the
right. You can yell fire in a movie theater if there's actually a fire.
Yes. Yes. But if you're trying to cause harm to other people, that's where the line of speech.
That's about intent.
Yeah. Right. So what's the line for the Second Amendment? What would that line for you be? Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah. No, I see what you're getting at. I haven't, to be honest.
Yeah.
My sense of it is that there isn't a line, that it is about personal responsibility.
Okay.
That each person is responsible. So, a lot of times this conversation will degenerate into talk about school shootings or talk about, the misuse of guns.
Yeah.
But ultimately, who's responsible for that, right? If one of the things that I've shared sometimes is that if with the number of guns that are in private ownership in this country, if guns were the problem, if firearms were the problem, you'd know it. Yeah. It would be more than just, the crime issues that we have.
I don't know if most people know this, but there are actually more guns in the country than there are people.
There actually are, yes. More guns than people.
Yeah. So, let's talk about why this issue comes up, why it matters.
Mm-hmm.
And that's in large part because we are seeing a wave of a lot of violent murders and a lot of multiple death stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we care about this, why we're talking about this, why it keeps coming up on campaigns and all that stuff. Why it devolves into fights, right?
Sure.
Is because actual people are getting killed and people are worried about the danger, especially in schools. I think that's probably a primary danger for people. They worry about sending their kids and that kind of stuff and how to make it safe.
Right.
I believe to my core that this is not just a gun problem. That I'm gonna carve out for the discussion school shootings, right? Okay. So if you're okay with that, I'm just gonna carve that out. So to me, the problem of school shootings is not just about guns. It just isn't.
Right.
But there is a piece of guns there. Does that make sense? Like, it's not all about guns, but there is part of this that, there is part of this that the culture of how we treat guns, how easy guns are to get, has exacerbated this.
And I can agree with you to an extent, but ultimately I'm going to step back and say, again, that's personal responsibility, right?
Okay.
That's the responsibility of the people who own the firearm and not the government to say, well, they shouldn't have had it.
Okay.
Okay.
So is there, again, going back to the line for the rights, right? All rights on the Constitution, outside the Constitution, natural rights, as our Catholic brothers and sisters across the street would say.
Right.
All of them have lines, right? They aren't universal in the sense of I get to use this right whenever I want to. There's always a line. There's always a line in terms of the right.
Well, this might be a foundational disagreement with us, in that I believe that particularly in the Bill of Rights, that these are absolutes.
Okay. But would you agree? Maybe you wouldn't, but would you agree that, like the First Amendment, there's a place where if you step over, you lose that right?
Okay, well, are we transitioning to the First Amendment?
Well, no, that's fair. I guess I'm using that because I know I have never heard the line put clearly about the Second Amendment, but all the time you hear that kind of line for the First Amendment. So I guess I'm using that as an example, not a transition to the First Amendment as much as I'm trying to figure out is there a way that somebody can step over the right of gun ownership and lose that right?
Well, they misuse the firearm.
Okay, they misuse the firearm. Is that the only way? Like, would you?
People end up in prison for it, right? They lose their right to firearm ownership.
So, for example, would you be comfortable if I said you have to be 21 to own a gun or to purchase a gun?
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with that.
Okay. How about 18?
I think 18 might be fair.
Okay.
I still think that so if I were to take my son to the range, their rules are he's got to be 12 or older to shoot on the range. Now, would I buy a 12-year-old a gun? No. Okay. I think, again, we're talking about a maturity level.
Okay.
So we all know this. You and I know this with having teenage sons.
Absolutely.
You can't set maturity level on their age.
Absolutely.
It's not like they turn 16 and all of a sudden they're mature or whatever. They might be younger or older.
Yeah, and you're right. So. There's an arbitratedness to doing 18 for voting. There's arbitratedness to doing 18 for driving. I guess what I'm getting at is if you are comfortable saying that an 18-year-old, you have to be 18 to purchase a gun, then on some level you're recognizing that the right isn't universal in the sense of there is lines we can draw. That, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so would you be comfortable if we get to decide this? I always say that when
this
we
is
talk
just
about
our
that.
government.
Yeah, it's just our government. It's just you and me. Just you and me. We get to make this decision. God help us if we ever lived in that kind of government, right? But
no, God help everybody else.
Yes. Our world would be perfect. Everyone else would be running around with their hair on fire, right? But if it was just you and me sitting down and we were going to work out the gun laws, right, in our little fiefdom, right? Okay. Would you be comfortable if I go, hey, I would like to say you have to be 18 to purchase a gun?
I would maybe, if it's our perfect world.
Yeah.
Okay. I might make that compromise 18 for a handgun.
Okay.
And 14 for a long gun.
Okay. And
okay,
see,
maybe.
Yeah, no, and see, I can understand that because my kids get mad at me all the time for bringing this up. But where I grew up in Kansas, you could get your driver's license at 14.
Mm-hmm.
And they did that because a ton of people worked on farms,
right.
and the 14-year-old needed to be running the combine or needed to be able
Right.
to take the truck down to get more feed. No, seriously, that's
Mhm.
why they
Yeah.
did that, right?
Yeah.
And so the context matters. And so, yeah, I could see, especially in more rural parts of the country, where hunting is a way of life, right?
Right.
Like my first church, Montana Mountain Church. It was literally on a mountain. They called it Montana Mountain. It was called Montana UMC. That community had a hunting day that they got off school,
Right.
and it was a part of the community that everybody
most
went
of,
hunting,
most
right?
of central Pennsylvania schools are off
So
the
I
first,
get that.
the first
I
day of
get
hunting
that. So
season.
like if
Yeah.
I was in charge, I would recognize, look, this community, hunting's important to them.
Right.
You know, and so they're going to take their kids hunting. If you're doing that, okay, I could totally get behind 16 for that. Let me ask you another thing. If we're making this stuff up on for ourselves, right? For our little fiefdom. I would honestly want a requirement that you had to get trained on your gun. You had to get at least trained, not on every gun you own. That would, to me, that would be, honestly, that would be silly. But that you at least got trained on how to use a firearm. You knew how to clean it, you knew how to take care of it, you knew how to shoot it.
I think basic firearm safety is absolutely, I wouldn't argue with you on that.
Okay.
I think it's vital if you're going to own one. But I really have a hard time making it a requirement.
Okay.
Right?
Because you see it as a right.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. But I think we're both.
Like I wouldn't do it any differently. And if I go to the range, the first time I go to the range, you have to sit for a safety class.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like a 20-minute safety class before they'll even let you walk. You know, go out on the range. So
I mean, I think it seems like we're in agreement that we'd be okay with an age requirement.
there's places where
right?
we're not,
and
far
we'd
off,
be
yeah.
okay with a training requirement on some level, right?
On some level.
Some level.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's something we could work with, right?
Right.
We could agree that people need to be trained, and there needs to be some kind of age.
Yeah, and ultimately for me, it's about, and I'll go back to this over and over again.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's about personal responsibility. That if you realize that that's not a toy,
Yeah.
right? Far too many times we see abused, you know, music videos and, you know, that sort of thing where it's like it's a prop, it's a toy. It's not, it's a dangerous thing. It's not a toy, it's a tool.
Yeah.
And like any other tool that has power, it can hurt or kill you.
Yes.
And so I think that's incumbent upon anyone who wants to own one to take that responsibility. This is dangerous. Be trained.
Okay.
Be careful. You know.
Yeah.
Follow safety precautions. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you. I'm going to say something. I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm going to check my phone again, just so I know what time it is, because I don't want to. Oh, you have a watch. What time is it? There you go.
Well, my watch says 7:49.
Okay, so this is. Why don't I ask my question? I'll make my statement. Ask my question, and then we'll turn it to questions for
Sure.
them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I guess I think it's helpful when I'm having a discussion with someone or I'm thinking about an issue to think about the strongest argument on the other side of the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to put myself in the bad seat first. I'm going to say what I think the strongest argument for folks that want less gun control, what their strongest argument is. Would you be willing, if I did that, to say what you think the strongest argument on the gun control side is? Does that make sense?
I can try.
Okay. Okay. So for you, again, this is a personal thing. It's the strongest argument that you hear on the other side.
You got to remember, we're riding my hobby horse right now.
I get you. I get you, and I appreciate that you're willing to take on you were able to allow us to have a conversation around your hobby horse, because this isn't a hobby horse for me. So kudos on you. Honestly, I appreciate it, because there are issues that would have been hard for me, and so this might be hard for
Right.
you. That I really do appreciate it. Okay, so to me, the strongest issue that I hear from people that want less gun control is some stuff that you stated. Two things really that I see interwoven. Partially, I think, because I grew up in a rural community. I grew up in Wichita, but I had a lot of family and farms and stuff. So the two things that to me are linked together are, I feel like we do have to affirm it is a right. It is a right. So it's not something that we can just go, you don't have it anymore. Like, it needs to have much more discussion than that. So I feel like that's a strong argument. And wrapped up with that is, for a lot of people, this is what they have done for generations. You know, fathers and sons, mothers and daughters have taught each other how to hunt for food, for sport, for fun, right? And it connects people. It's a community building activity. And so to just rip it away is something that's not taking seriously the culture of a community you don't understand.
I would,
Right.
if I might, I
Yeah,
would
yeah.
also steel man that with that it is also a right to self-preservation.
Yeah, okay.
So
That's fine. So the right piece, I feel like, is the strongest piece. So what, from your side, the folks who are arguing for more gun control, what do you feel like their strongest argument is? Or the one that resonates with you the most?
the one that I hear the most, that I can understand
Yeah.
at least, is the safety part of it.
Okay.
The part of it that, people feel that less firearms will make the world safer.
Okay.
I disagree with that.
But-
Obviously, I mean, but
But you understand where they're coming from.
I hear that.
Okay. Cool.
So.
Okay. So now we're going to transition. Thank you for the conversation. I appreciate that. Thanks. So
Look, we didn't fight either.
yeah, no, we didn't.
I think we both stand up.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. We're going to end pretty soon. I don't want to keep you much longer. I was worried about having too little or too
Not enough.
not having
material.
enough time, and now I realize I was stupid. But in our conversation, is there anything that you noticed? Is there anything that you noticed from what we talked about before? Anything you noticed about our conversation?
It was a two-way conversation,
Yeah.
listening, both listening, both saying what you thought the other person was saying,
Okay.
and if it was wrong, then you would say, but this is how I meant it, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So, and it wasn't heated,
Yeah.
and you both came across very well
Yeah.
in what you feel.
So you felt like we really tried to listen to each other, that we restated each other's points, and we tried to actually have a conversation. Okay. Okay. No judging. Okay.
That's
yeah. Yeah.
and I will say, that's easier to do because we have that foundation, right?
Of a
That we're
relationship.
already friendly. That
Yeah.
we're already friends. Which, by the way, I forgot to mention earlier that one of the things that we do together as well
Yes. God.
is every Friday morning.
Yep.
There's a podcast that comes out. Jonathan and I, every week, we watch a different movie and we talk about it theologically.
Yeah.
And that's called Finding God in the Dark.
Yep.
And it's out there. Look it up on Facebook and on YouTube.
Yep.
So
So yeah, you're right. That relationship helps, and lean on the relationships you're having. When you're having a conversation, lean on the relationship. That's valuable. If you have a relationship, lean on it.
As the two of you were conversing,
Yeah.
having discourse,
Yeah.
my mind started to wander, because it's a very heated, it can be a
Yeah.
sure can. Absolutely.
heated
Yeah.
discussion.
Mhm.
And I guess that's my problem with, there's a lack of civility. I find this just like, in the work world, you're at Wawa, or you're out there just chatting with neighbors or whatever, the vitriol and the lack of
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because I'm trying not to lose my cool, but like I don't know how well that conversation would go if there was no
Yeah.
relationship.
No, and that again, if we didn't have a relationship, we would have a different conversation, and that's okay for you to recognize.
Very possibly, yeah.
But one thing I would say to you is recognize how you're feeling, and work on yourself.
Yeah, no, and I really have control over
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Like it's I'm
Yeah.
actually having a physical reaction
Yeah.
because I'm trying not to blow.
Yeah.
I wanna be the better person.
Yeah.
I wanna have the Christian mindset and
Yeah.
be, okay, we can suck in some oxygen.
Yeah.
You can get through,
Deep breath, count to
Deep breath,
10.
yeah.
Yeah.
Actually what I do is just, I guess the discourse doesn't continue.
Yeah.
And the conversation doesn't turn productive because, in order to protect myself before I say something.
It's definitely she's talking for the people that are joining us online. She's talking about how do you deal with if you feel tense, you feel stressed out. How do you have those conversations? Sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't. I also think it's very helpful to claim some of that and go like, I'm just going to randomly pull a name out. Bob, I really want to talk about this with you, but right now I'm just not in a space. I feel like I might lose my temper. I might say stuff I regret. So I'm not going to have the conversation with you right now, but I do want to have it. So I'd like to call you and I'd like to take you out for coffee and we can have it later.
Food.
Food, again. But again, if you're stressed out, always claim it and articulate it. But also say, I don't want to be there. I don't want to be there with you because I would really like to have the conversation.
Yeah, and sometimes it's okay to just say, this is not the right time.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is not the perfect time for me. And maybe there will never be a perfect time, right?
Yeah.
But this is not the right time. I know right now I'm too emotionally involved in this to have the conversation. So let's talk tomorrow.
What
or
might
whatever.
be helpful is to say in that situation, you know what? Right now I feel so stressed. And I feel so stressed because of this conversation, and I don't like how I feel. Are you feeling that way?
Or you don't even have to, I mean, honestly, you may not even have to say because of the conversation.
Yeah.
Just right now I'm really stressed and I need to go home or whatever.
Yeah.
I need to
But
step
sometimes
away.
you can have a conversation about how you feel. And go like, I'm feeling stressed.
Yeah.
Are you feeling stressed? What could we do to not feel stressed and maybe still have the conversation? What would help? What would help calm you down? Here's some things and then have in your mind go like, it really helps me to calm down when I sit down. So would you mind if we went and found a place to sit?
Bourbon.
Yeah.
Oh,
bourbon.
no,
Bourbon.
that's not.
Again, we're Methodists, so
Sorry.
it's okay.
Did I say that out loud? I'm
we're
sorry.
We're not serving it in the church right now, so it's fine. Any other things before we break really fast? Yeah.
And then there's, I'm not using the right terminology, the
Body
Body
language.
language?
Yeah.
body language. When you said to Don,
Yeah.
so I would do, he said you would do your part in terms of what's the worst, those
The best argument from the other side. Yeah.
would you be willing to do
Yeah.
the best argument
Yeah.
on the other side?
Yeah.
And he said, I think so.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, he said, I'll try.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
immediately sat back.
Yeah.
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 So obviously, he was going to have trouble.
And again, if you're going to
And I knew that.
if you're going to ask a hard question of the person you're talking with, it often helps the situation if you're willing to say, I'm going to answer the hard question first. And if I answer this question first, would you be willing to answer the question? I'll go first, would you then follow? And that's helpful because if I would have just turned to you and said, okay, give me the best argument for gun control.
Oh, please.
Then, right? Then he's on the spot. But if I go, hey, I'm going to be vulnerable here, because that's what you're doing. I'm going to be vulnerable here and say, this is the best argument I heard from the other side. If I am honest and vulnerable with you that this is an argument I think is a good argument, would you be willing to offer up an argument from my side that you think is a good argument?
Right. And the hard, and I will tell you, probably heard it. The hard part for me was not just articulating that, but also not arguing against it, right? Because I wanted to say, well, safety, but here's why it's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I didn't do that.
Yeah. Any other?
I said I don't agree with it. That's
Any other questions or comments that you want to have? Yeah.
I think that it's right for somebody to tell you how you should live your life.
that's a loaded question.
Yeah,
that
is a loaded question.
for the stream.
Yeah. Yeah. For this, sorry, let me restate it so people can hear it. So she asked, do you feel like it's right for someone to tell someone else how to live? Is that basically what you were asking? Okay. So long story short, that's a complicated question to answer.
Yeah.
Because part of what pastors do is we try to say, this is what we see in Scripture or tradition and what it says about how to live, right? So
this is what Jesus told you to do.
And then, of course, I would say, well, as parents, that's part of your job, is you teach your kid how to think about life so that they live a certain way. That's part of what a parent's job is. But where I would have to say it's a really complicated question is, do I think I have an automatic right to tell somebody else that I don't know, that I don't have a relationship with, that I'm not their pastor of, how they're supposed to live? No.
Yeah, that's not
because again,
not going to work.
The relationships matters. And that's what we're trying to get at. If you get nothing out, you walk out of here and get nothing else, I hope you will get relationships matter when you're having conversations.
Right.
And so, if someone comes off the street and wants to talk to me about gun control, and I don't know them, I'm going to have a different conversation with them than I'm going to have with my sons. Or if one of my parishioners comes up and talks to me about gun control. Because I'm going to live into the relationship I have, and I have a different relationship with all those three kinds of people. And what you need to realize is that your relationships matter about how you have conversations. And so it's okay to notice that, but you have to notice that and take that into consideration.
And nobody wants to be told how to live their lives. And trust me, if that's how you start off, you're not going anywhere. You're not building anything.
Yeah, and it's much more effective if you show people how to live than if you tell them how to live.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And that's part of, and you show people how to live because how you live and how you choose to live. So that's why conversations, you've got to take the lead. So if you want to have a difficult conversation with somebody, but you want to treat them with love, care, and compassion, then guess what? You have to start it. And that's part of what Christians, I'm going to challenge you as Christians to recognize that if the country's going to change in how they do this, it's going to start with Christians choosing to be Christ-like.
Amen. Which
means that you care more about the person that you're having a conversation with than you care about the issue you're having with them. Right. But to do that, you have to model it. You can't just tell someone, hey, you have to treat me with respect. You actually have to first show the person that you respect them. And I hope you've gotten some of that tonight. So is there anything else before we close? Okay. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for joining us online.
Should we close this with some prayer?
Yes, I was going to actually ask you to pray.
Oh, you're going to ask me to pray?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you pray. Pray us out.
All right. Friends, join me in prayer. God, we thank you for this opportunity to gather together, both in person and online, to learn, to grow, to just hopefully, Lord, take a few more steps in your footsteps. Lord, help us to have these better conversations, to model you in this world, that the world might learn you from us. In Jesus' name we pray this. Amen.
Amen. Good night, everybody.
Thank you all.